you for joining us a little bit. But in the meantime, we can warm up and start listening to each other. This panel is focusing on new institutionalizations, and after discussion of pedagogy and methods, the question of institutionalizations really needs to be opened up, because one is that we are in transforming times, and we have observed over the last the histories of institutions how there is always an urge for educational processes to consolidate and solidify, and then they become these large institutions which kind of become inevitably inert and hard to move. And that kind of completely intersecting with the new social that we are talking about does not yield any kind of productive results. And therefore, the need to reinvent the idea of institutions. So in this panel, we are going to talk about what are the challenges and opportunities in these emerging contexts to imagine an institution and therefore its form. And how should institutions also define themselves? What should their key definitions be? How should they mutate? What kind of networks are required to then sustain them? And what kind of experiments and contexts do they need to sustain in order to flourish? So, in order to discuss all these questions, we have some very interesting discussants in this panel, and I will quickly run through their backgrounds. We have Satyush Shankar from Nagarjuna University, and I've been informed that he's also the Vice Chancellor of the university now. He's a practicing architect and an academic, and he's also the Provost of Nagarjuna University and the Dean of SEDA, which is a part of Nagarjuna University in Vadodara. He is a guest professor at the Ruplu Sarkana program at architecture faculty in Germany. And before this, he also taught at the Faculty of Architecture at CERT for more than 2 decades. And during his career at CERT, he held the position of the acting dean of architecture, apart from being the head of undergraduate program. He was also appointed as the director of the undergraduate office, which is a self-university level position where he taught about major reforms by introducing choice-based learning, flexible curriculum, and major minor-based programs. So I'm sure that we'll get to hear a lot more about how he brought these changes into force at the various kinds of institutions that will be associated. We have Professor Vinod Arana, who is also an architect, urban planner, and a sustainability specialist. He is the director of the NETE Institute of Architecture, and he is a key visionary who has networked with organizations in India, US, and Indonesia to bring about positive change in policy and grassroots public participation. He holds a dual master's degree in architecture and urban planning from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign in USA, and a certificate in business administration from UIU. And he's also an accredited professional. Our third panelist is Dr. Samini Raja, who is a professor and head of department at the Urban Institute of Design in Kerala, and also the chairperson of Board of Studies in Design at the University of Calicut in India. And she has almost a decade of academic experience, and she views design as an ongoing process involving dialogue and negotiation between society, culture, and environment. She co-founded the studio Commune and serves as the director of research. And also she has received many awards and scholarships from various institutions across the world. To save time, I'll just kind of skip all the list of very interesting engagements that she had. But the latest one being the Fulbright Nehru Visiting Scholar program, which she was involved in with the International Education Administrator Seminar in the US just last year in 2024. She published extensively in national and international peer-reviewed journals and conferences, and she also collaborates with various educational institutions and NGOs along with government agencies in India. And from C we have Prasad Shetty, the dean, one of the co-founders of the school, and myself, Anush Daga. I am an assistant professor at the school. So yeah, with that background, I'll invite Pratyush to maybe share his thoughts and ideas first.
Thank you very much, and thanks to C. Gopalian for inviting me. I couldn't make it to the first 2 days. I don't have a presentation, but I have some thoughts that I would like to share with you with the package of institutionalization. What I've done is I'm just sharing my experience of not only my present institution, but also my past institution, which was set for almost 20 years. And what I'm saying is that this is a very interesting time in the country where we are finding so many small spaces or different kind of voices in architectural education. I call it a special time because I don't think at any moment in the last many decades we had so many different schools being extremely self-driven and self-conscious. I use the word self-conscious very specifically about the work that they are doing. Having said that, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to hint at or point towards certain, I would like to call as fault lines that exist in our institutional setup. These are generic fault lines which is very important to be aware of. And unless and until we are able to find solutions to those fault lines or are aware of it and find ways to mitigate those, these special moments can quickly evaporate. I have seen institutions change very fast. The fragility of an institution is, and institutions in India presently are very exciting but also extremely fragile, which is a problem. And I think the first fault line that really exists is that unfortunately we are operating with private capital and private money, and I'm referring to tuition fees. Right? And I think this is going to be the fundamental contradiction for change of our growth and moving on what we want to do, because I do not see that as a very good foundation, which means that we are actually running our institutions, and I'm not referring to public university, I'm referring to private universities or even colleges like these that are affiliated to other universities, but essentially they are left to fend for themselves. What has also happened post last 15 years is there has been a kind of I would say, a view that one has to be away from the government, away from the state, because one needs to be autonomous. Right? That's also been one of the views. So if you're private, you have things in your hand, you are autonomous, you can do what you want, you could be free. But we should also remember that when we are private, we are only accountable to the private money that is flowing in the system, which in itself is at loggerheads with a lot of things all of you are talking about. I mean, one is talking about a new way of looking at institutions, new way of looking at a society and a city and where this country should be headed. And I think this is one kind of a contradiction that one needs to find a way out. I'm very much, now I'm able to understand it much better, what we call as a trust. Yeah? So theoretically speaking, all private institutions should be or are run by a trust. But I think the nature of the trust is very, very important. The pulls and forces in the trust are very, very important. You have trusts that could be extremely unidimensional. And I am advocating a trust that has a kind of a multiple representation of diversity of representation, because unless you have a trust that is always in a state of tension, I would say, like a good school, the chances that this trust will be hijacked, you use the word hijack when you're talking about science, by a certain agenda becomes very, very easy. I think we need to, as leaders of institutions, as professors, participate more in the making or in the making of the what we call as management, but I would like to call as a trust. And we tend to shy away from that usually if given a chance. And I think that is very important. The moment we have so much of private money in education, we are actually losing our diversity. We might say that we are diverse by the virtue of the students that I get students from Assam or Karnataka or Kerala. That's the regional diversity. And I'm fundamentally addressing economic diversity. I think as architectural institutes, we are also becoming less diverse increasingly in terms of the class of people we are catering to. So one of the things that I think we need to be extremely aware of as senior professors or leaders is what is the nature of this trust or of the institute that we want to create. And the reason that I feel institutes change very suddenly is because of their inability to create variety of connections and networks. And let me give you an example. It is one thing to have brilliant professors, brilliant teachers, and do brilliant work. But then if you really want this to last long, you have to create institutional memory. And that memory is not the memory only of the teachers or the students. The institutes will have to begin to network with other actors in the society. It could be the state, it could be the civil society, it could be other institutions, it could be friends of an institution. And I've seen that now I can say with more confidence, institutions that were able to create a network of relationships which was beyond the relationship of teacher and student. We're all talking about co-learners, which is fine as a teacher, it's nice to say that, but that co-learning space can be erased in no time. Unless and until there are multiple networks in place for an institution. So when C is asking this question, where next, my hint of advice would be, well, multiple networks. What multiple networks do is they create a system of check and balance. Those systems of check and balance are when you were talking about how institutes get fossilized, that was the extreme example of, let's say, a public university that has so much checks and balance that it is not able to move. You do need to be nimble. You do need to be able to change very fast. But you do need to struggle to make that change. Because if that struggle, if that negotiation is not there, that means your institute does not have enough check and balance. So the ease by which I can bring about change is the ease that also exists from somebody external to come and change me without me liking it, you know what I mean. So I think as institutions it is very, very vital to, which is a troublesome process by the way, to be accountable or be answerable to multiple agencies is a problem. But I think it is the heart of institution. So that's one premise that I have. We have so many models now. We have, of course, the classic public university, state university model. But within also the private university, we have an affiliation model, and we have a small private university model. And I think all of us need to be very extremely conscious of the model and what is the kind of networks or connections we make. We might like to use the word stakeholder if you want a better word. And I think, of course, the larger objective of a university is to not simply create graduates that are for the industry. The university has to have a long view of the society. It has a long view of where the nation should be headed, etc. We know that. To really fulfill that objective, I think the private institutions have to be far more complex as being not so simple, if I may use the word. And I think there are two more points I would quickly like to make, so that there's some time for question and answer. I think we need to sit back and look at these 5-10 institutes that have come on this table and see what is the city doing to the institute. And there's a question, I mean, we always want to assume that architectural institutes are talking to other architectural institutes. And we want to assume that we exist in an autonomous space. I mean, there's so much of an autonomy of the profession of architect that we believe. We are not. You are a product, very much a product of the city that you come in. And therein lies a great opportunity for each institute to be a lot more diverse than others. So if a Wadeyar College in Mysore is a college of Mysore, and what does it have to offer? How is its sensibility shaped by the city? How is the sensibility of an institute like C or Kamla Raheja? When I look at Kamla Raheja and I see the work they do, there's something about Bombay in that institute, And I think that could be a very, very vital conversation because one, it will allow us to connect with the city and certain sections of the society of the city, and also it might allow us to have a unique proposition. I think as much as we should be collaborating and we should be working together, I think we should also create a condition where every school might have a very different take on what architecture should be or how they should be teaching. You need to see more disagreements among schools, and I'm talking about disagreements in a very healthy fashion. You might have a school that's totally wedded to the idea of social ecology. You might have a school that is totally wedded to the idea of capital flows, or a school that's very geographical in its approach, coming from a historical geographical perspective. I think this is the moment in history where it seems to be possible. But it has been made also possible because spaces like C or Wadeyar can exist now, which was very difficult, let's say, in the more monolith of an earlier institution. So I think these are the couple of opening points I have. I mean, I'm not getting to the next question, which is maybe another panel, is how does institute create a nourishing environment? Rather than, that's what we tell all our deans and all our program chairs. Our job is not to tell you what's going on, what you should be doing. Our job is to create the right environment, and then it should be surprised to us, hey, this is what you did. I mean, that's our job. Our job is not to say, this is my ideology and I don't want the school. The school cannot be a mirror of myself, right? And I think the school's job, as I always see it as a dean, is to create the right environment, and that's very difficult, so that somebody comes and says, this is what we can be, which is very difficult. And that's another question which I'm not getting into. That's another range of question of ideologies of school. This is more on, so this is where I was saying first few comments.
Thank you so much, Pratyush, for sharing those insights. I'll invite Professor Vinod Rana to present his.
The intention here being that just to give an idea about being what it is to be a new institution, where we come from, how did this happen. I'm from practice, not from India. A very neatly gotten possibly because I went to study a little at a later stage after many years, a couple of years of practice. And when I came back for some reasons of my family, and was here, I was kind of pulled into this and I said, come, can you teach at this particular school? And then I kind of liked it. And then several of us, maybe like over here, friends, their friends of ours as well. So several of us in mind said, let's start a school for architecture. And so we looked around and asked for what together. We put together some financials and looked at the place. And then when we felt as we were going through this, the university noters kind of say, hey, well, we continue studying one, we're going to do this with us. And having gone in Manipal for that brief moment where I was doing the studio, I realized that the dean to the university status is something that gave a lot of flexibility. And so coming to the university where this was possible, I realized we could have tailor courses, work things out, and all of that. And so this is where we started the School of Architecture in 2015. And what should we do? Because the seven of us were saying, why should we start? It's not a commercial, there'll be some money coming out of it, but that's besides the point. We're starting for a purpose, and what was the difference? So one of them was the geographical area where we live in South Canada, Dakshin Kannada, the coastal Karnataka region that's rich in culture. Even the Ankara will kind of show you, where you can reach. It's got all the roads from Uttar Pradesh to Kambara, Yakshagana, and all of it. Kerala is pretty close, it's just 10 kilometers from the Kerala border. And there's so much of it, we said, okay, let's do this. So what syllabus, what curriculum, what should we be doing? And so, good friends, I don't pick names, but some of pretty people, heavy rates in architecture were contacted. In fact, we got Charles Collier to man to have a talk discussion, and many others part of it. So we put together a team, and this is where I come from, this consensus thing. And not much of agreement. We almost had 15 people, reached out to 50 people discussing what should the curriculum and the structure be. And there was a lot of different ideas, and sometimes there were disagreements as to what might it be, streams of thought. So finally we hopped upon something what we felt was good as the cooperative method of education, right? You use that work between working in school and in practice. So you intersperse this arrangement. And so we felt this might be something we'd like to take up. But looking at Council of Architecture and all the stipulations there, that was not to be, couldn't do a real course. So we figured out a way of number crunching, kind of credits and all of it together. And finally came upon this kind of a hybrid core we got and so I don't have a structure here, but finally as you go through the 10 semesters, we did the first year as what is called as foundation year. We don't teach architecture in semester 1, semester 2 we agreed to it. Semester 3 is when architectural design actually starts. And so you have the semester 3, 4, 5 of those intensive learning semesters. Semester 6 they go out into the co-op, which means they go into an internship. It's not that if it's CO, it's internship, that we might be in trouble. But we took this as a bunch of electives that students get counsel in the school and say what would you like to do, and you do stuff other than architecture. So that we have, over the last 5 years that we graduated students have worked in a variety of places. They also worked with some architects and designers, but otherwise they worked with internet providers, worked in the film industry, they worked with policy planners, they worked with, like the Gunnar Sharma types or the ones that are and so many others. Very exciting, and so when we come back from that internship, and we have, especially the externals who come for a duty, it's very refreshing. You're coming with people working with internet stories and whatnot. And we found, over a period of time, when they graduate, this particular walk has given them that extra feel to do something beyond what they had probably come here to study first architecture. And we noticed close to about 30-35% of them have taken the areas other than architecture of their graduate. After the at least 3 batches to 4 batches, we realized that there's been this thing, people in the construction, there are people who are in authorship of books, writing, journalism has been somebody's gone to the film side of things, sort of came out of it as something that we work. I just come back to the universities, like Katush was mentioning, we need to be careful about things. So we ourselves were careful as to wonder what are we getting into. Because we wanted to start something more until there's this university. Universities have built a framework on which one can actually work with, and being deemed to be, and that autonomy seems to be good. Fortunately for us, management is good. We have folks who treat this like an NGO, but here architecture is money can come from other areas, but architecture is something we want to do. We are consciously have a very small number, 40 at all, all through then just 40. And the university goes for these rankings and ratings. It's 66 out of 1,200 universities. It's an A+ ranking and all of that. But the point here is, how are we a little different from the others? And what could we do under a deemed to be university setup? So I could think that possibly flexibility was one area, innovation was another, and among these two, at least basic ones that are listed out over here, when you say flexibility, it's from assessment, from formative to summative assessment. 90% of our courses do not have any written examinations. They're all, you have to submit a paper, an essay, or conduct an exhibition, or portfolio evaluations, juries, all of those things, many of those. Based on field trips that you go out, so a lot of formative and then summative. So there are small, 10-15% max, which is on the summative portion of the team. Then we will be different in terms of rethinking our courses to make them useful. The other day we were talking about history, and I just saw some of the works presented very nice on history program. So we do have a way of how we decided right then that we should change the way of how we teach history. Conventionally, many of us went through the various periods of time, whereas here we go actually, we go across the periods, we go across different civilizations, different areas to look at power, faith, the working with society. So the way our history courses just work, say for the first 5 semesters, is we talk about culturescapes, society works. We do works on architecture and change, we start to work with material and social issues. Then we go into history and construction, where we add construction, and so structures gets integrated into all of that, historically across the board. And we get into 4th semester, it's history and urbanism, and 5th is the second part of it, where we need to do South Asia studies and all of that. So it's a little different. We think it's good, but there may be always ways to improve on that. Whether it's professional practice or other areas. So we have a lot of areas where we have these, the ability to kind of elect. So we have 24 categories of electives. Not that we're going to have 24 of them immediately, but when you have those categories, it becomes the flexibility becomes easy for us. Now we can tailor a program under something called construction elements, for example. And then maybe do a design and build program under that. So there are a lot of ways of how you can utilize each of those. We have value-added courses, and we have summer school. We have the 8th edition of summer school was held in 2024, where we deal on skill and travel, etc. On the area of innovation, this integration of courses that we talked about is something we think is good. We also have a thrust on entrepreneurship, where we feel that this is a thrust area for the school, where we consciously work with students to see that they work towards entrepreneurship. Some must start up. It's very difficult to just say, because this requires, it's about almost 4 years now, and we've got our first startup coming one from faculty, one from student now. Currently, even today as we speak, the 4th session of a 4-week program on entrepreneurship architects, conducted by an architect is going on. 50 students are registered, now it's reached 45, after 4 weeks of a dropout rate. And they come on Saturdays and Sundays. It's just out of interest, your passion. I will come to program structure where I mentioned for the co-op, or maybe the slide next, or the one maybe after that. So this is where the co-op is, where we bridge this thing across every year. We say increase employability, specialization, behavior, entrepreneurship, skills, and network. So a couple of areas we still to build on this even more, but I think it's a good way that we think has worked for us. We can go to the next one. Some of the impacts of it. We've not written them all, but just remember, I just written that there are a lot of people we have young practices. So we have a say 4 of them, like there was a group of 4 of them, 3 boys and a girl got together and said, okay, we're starting this office because one's a good photographer, one's good for business development, one can manage the people around and run something else. So people get together in collaborative sets of groups, and that's very nice. People get into into areas of movies and so many other things. Some people into research. In this area. This is again, I just explained this a little more. There's much more to say about it, but it's kind of history theory, how this could happen. So we divided the whole program of 5 years into 3 levels. And level 1 is semester 1 and 2, and foundation studio sits in semester 1. And we are proud of this studio because this sets the pace for people who come from the plus 12, 11, up to 12 standard. And we go through this little process of unlearning, relearning, getting into natural behaviors, increasing sensitization, awareness. It's quite a process. But at the end of this first semester itself, they kind of see the skills that people develop, both in terms of cognitive skills, creative, and the ability to start at a base. And if you go to this next slide, you might see some examples of how this goes. I put coach there because Prasad was an adult, like a doctor said, discovery, and thanks to you, I'm able to use that as well. So I think this collaborative way of working with schools and others helps us a lot because we do pick some things up on each one, and so this has helped us. Because of the making aspect of where we are in a school, we consciously developed these maker spaces. So we have a fab lab, we have a model, there are dedicated spaces, and including a prototyping lab, a workshop where students are able to, most of these are semester 1 outlook. So some of it is where it's about design, but it's also about structure. It's a little limited at this stage, but in semester 2, this gets a little bit more understanding of structure happens where we have a professor of practice who's from industry and he goes to practice literally. He sits with the students along. This studio is multidisciplinary. So for example, we have architects, we have mechanical engineers, sometimes a product designers, structure person, all working together to make this happen. We work in semester 2. It keeps varying from year to year. It's an evolution of what we start in 1 year, and we check the checks and balances of whether it works or not, and then we start to work together a few things. So see here some of the clay models that you see about stories, between how they work. So in this, where we have introduction to architectural studios, students work to design a space for human being, animal, bird, whatever. Design and build. So this iteration of center from your school step. So presently we are doing one on a suspension bridge. So where you are able to do the suspension bridge within the 10 days. So we are kind of doing a model for the very first time. Because every other time we built, there's an extension to the cafeteria and bamboo bridge. We have a bus stop for that bridge. We have some failed experiments, and that's also okay. We have some they try a mechanical device, moving solar and all that. We spent some time with them probably, but there's not a learning. Okay, I just put 2 slides of this here. Besides all of it that we do at the school, this is the kind of, because we're so small in numbers, it's a kind of a personalized feeling. We call ourselves a boutique school of architecture. We're really very small. We manage so we have a strong student support system in terms of mentoring. This mentoring is about design confidentiality agreements with us. It gets a sense of we have counselor on campus, and this is for faculty and the counselor. So it's a kind of a elaborate system which will take us up to understand that student support is important in all of these, because as much as they work, they also need yes. Where we ensure that we try to get the best students we can on board. So for which there is scholarship in terms of fee concessions. And this is systematically given or specifically given the purpose of attracting students who are from the so-called were able to plan a bit of aptitude. And aptitude marks on one hand was also we evaluate portfolios and personal portfolios, see how they're doing. So based on that, they do every scholarship. So very good. This is another thing called the lead trading system. It's developed by our management students. Very unique. It's like the stock market where you issue cards with the beginning of the semester, and they trade them as a market maker, as a price, as a dynamic pricing. That works. When you buy, the price goes up. Unless the price comes down, so we have to over 4-5 years. So recently, we just got them out, and some person told me they sold them, and they got their pocket and this and that. So we just put on a slight hold on our the next 15 months to examine it again. But we've done it successfully since 2018. Yes. So we feel that we could be, because of the location, maybe the topical side of things will be deeply, and we're also going into a campus, which is another 120 acres that we ask for 5 acres for us. So I'm the same, not the School of Architecture, but the Dean Design Chair. Oh, sorry, the Dean Inclusive Design Chair. And so we were trying to work out a way of how we won't get into architecture per se. Will be there architecture, but this will be what we call as a global center of sustainability, which will be interdisciplinary architecture, the technology guys, the guys from we have people who work with a lot of ecological work on our campus, biological research. We have predominantly health sciences universities, including health sides of things. So that's where we thought we would venture into as we go ahead. So we're very happy to be here. We're not really a lot of lovely conversation that are happening, and thanks for also giving some thoughts on the ways of how collaboration will happen. Yes, in fact, we also have enriched all this knowledge and hope to participate closely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Rana. I will now invite Swamini to present.
Thank you. So firstly, thanks to CE for once again inviting me to this platform. It's always an enriching experience to be at CNN, and my colleagues really dread the time I go back, because I go back with so many ideas that they feel that you should stop going to see. I'm just joking, no, but it's fun. So yeah, so it's such a honor to represent my wonderful set of colleagues and the community back home. Avni is situated, I think some of you might be following us on Instagram and other pages, but I thought I should give a slightly bigger picture of the institution here. So as the picture rightly suggests, we are situated in the foothills of Western Ghats. You can see the Ghats. Some of the colleagues at CE have been part of our various pedagogical experiments and visited our campus. Now this place is called Tamarasheri. Tamarasheri is a small village. I'll be very careful with that term, because in Kerala, village, towns, cities are very different from what you see in Mumbai. So, but at least for us, it's situated in a village which also has a mall, which has 3 theatres. So it's a very different landscape. But yeah, so it's a village which is about 35 kilometers from the city of Calcutta. When I say Avni Institute of Design, I don't just speak about the 6 acres of land that we inhabit as an institution, but also that we are part of a larger ecosystem, which is about 100 acres of rubber plantation, and we are in the middle of this rubber plantation. Now, this place has a very serious history, because it's a history of resource extraction, because this is the foothills of the Ghats, which was inhabited by the indigenous communities, which in the 1920s, there was a huge migration from the central and southern part of Kerala trying to occupy these lands to find new means of cultivation and finding new production processes. So this 100 acres that we call and the 6 acres that we inhabit is in fact a product of this monoculture that came about in the 1920s onwards, which is being challenged now because of the fragility of the Western Ghats, which I think you have been hearing through the newspaper articles and all of that, where recently 3 villages were washed off in the landslide, which is not very far, which is only 45 to 40 kilometers away from our campus. So it is a very, very fragile ecosystem, which is several layers of history, and it is also highly vulnerable to the challenges that are posed by the climate. But having said that, the people and the making of this institution is deep-rooted in the idea that the institution cannot be a fenced walled area, but it needs to have connections to where we are, the people who are our neighbors. We can be local, but we also need to have a participation in the world building. So also another context I want to bring in here is the Kozhikode district, which we are part of, is part of a larger socio-cultural space called the Malabar region. And Malabar region for the longest period have been having these large family structures. It's a trade-based economy. Probably Kozhikode is the first place where Vasco da Gama entered into probably Kerala, the southern part of India. But it is also highly cosmopolitan because of the kind of trade that we've had over a period of time. Now, why am I saying all of this? Because at AVNI, around 30% of our students are in TICS 18 and 30% of the students largely are first generation college goers of the families, if not probably school goers. Most of their families are very well established as traders, and for several generations they have been trading not only within the country but also with Arab nations and also other, probably might even go back to Egyptian and other countries. We have about 10% of the students who fall within the economically weaker sections, and all of them are on scholarships, either from the state government or from government. And interestingly, only 1% of our students represent the entire country. So we have students coming from Assam, we have certain students coming from Bangalore, maybe from Coimbatore, Hyderabad, like that, but we constitute only 1% of our total population. So this mix of a small town, village, climate, the range of students, the kind of backgrounds that they come from, we need to keep all of this in picture while we sort of think about what is the role of an institution in the Higher institution. Now, what are the perceptions here for a common person from a middle income family in Kerala or DR, Bachelor of Architecture, which is only course currently that we are offering? The Bachelor of Architecture is nothing but an extension of BTech engineering. And you ought to get a job after you complete PR. Now, that is again another challenge because we also have to deal with parents in a very, very different ways when it comes to working as an institution. So, when this was established in 2015 by 4 architects who have full-fledged architectural field-based practice in Calicut, architect Tony Joseph, who is a founder, architect Vivek Beti, architect Brijesh Shaijan, and architect Vinod Salim, all quite well known in the field. For them, it was about building a community, and one of the biggest challenges has been what is this community? What is a form of this community that we need to think about? So, at various points in time, we have been thinking about the multidisciplinarity that we need to bring in. How do we connect with the local community? How do we bring discussions on architecture to the city? Because there are several colleges, but in and around capital city, but how do we speak to the people about the relevance of architecture and who an architect is? And the second major pillar that holds us together is the idea of collectivity, and that's something we feel that that will take us for a longer period in time. Like what Pratyush rightly mentioned, there is a nature of fragility many institutions go through, and probably for us collectivity is what would take us forward. And having said that, collectivity also comes in through the role of students in decision making at government. Students are also equally represented in various decision making processes. I will elaborate it a little later. But having said all this, I think it's important for us to acknowledge here that we are affiliated with the University of Calicut. I'm sure Kiran would agree how difficult it is sometimes to affiliate to a university which has more than 10 to 15 colleges that are offering the same course. In that sense, unlike at C, where only at semester 6 and semester 10, the university sort of comes in, for us they come in at every level. We have to come, the students have to write 2 internal exams in between a semester, followed by a full-fledged university-led exam towards the end of the semester, where the question papers are not even prepared by the teachers who are teaching in the university. It comes from somewhere else. So, and the jurors are also decided mostly by the university. So, this is the system, or how we're situated within this idea of an institution. So, I'm just going to, these are just placeholders here. So there was this provocation or the question, what can a future institution look like? And I think it is to a large extent the connections that we are building within the community of teachers, students, administrators, staff, and others within that what we call as an institution. That should be a kind of tie that holds us together as a community. Because end of the day, it is a home away from home for all of us. Because from the head to probably the housekeeping staff, many of us don't belong to this cultural geography. We all are migrants in one way or the other. So for students, how do we help students find a home away from home? So this picture here, I purposely put this here. This is part of our annual general body meeting where all of us come together as a community and we actually speak to each other about the issues and worries that we have and try to find ways of finding solutions then and there. Also, nurturing diversity. As you rightly said, Pratyush, it's not just about representing different parts of the country, but how do we represent students who are from different sections of the society. In fact, we don't really disclose what sections of the society they come from to our faculty members, because everyone's on the same page, but it's just happening to get to know what kind of difficulties they go through and we sort of support them with it. But we also have mentorship systems where the teacher gets to know slightly better what the student really needs. And also have a full-fledged wellness, wellness wing, which is supported by Mental Health Action Trust, who engage with the students on a day-to-day basis. So, what are those ways of being in this community? So, we say that it is with coffee and not just with drawing that we sort of build the community. So, some of the mornings we have students who are doing Zumba, and there are students who are probably doing some yoga, or there are students who are offering courses within our campus. So it's not, somebody might offer a course on Bharatanatyam, somebody might offer a course in Silamba. So it's that blurring of the boundary where you are the only one instructing. No, you are also a student sometimes for a student who is offering in Silamba as a class. So, and most importantly for us, it is about an ecology of seekers. how do we build an ecology where people come together, people discuss the ideas, thoughts, and therefore we have a lot of mechanisms through which faculty sort of work together. What we call as the AMI annual, AMI Learning and Teaching Colloquium and AMI Annual Research Symposium. And we also have AMI Essay Prize and Reading Club, and there is Students Collective, Student Councils. A lot of these embedded into the structure. Now, I call it a fragile system, and I like the idea of a fragile, form, because then it's not just about one person running it, but it's also about a lot of people coming together as a community. I also feel that as we are situated in a particular cultural geography, it's important for us to bring voices from different facets of life. So we invite ecologists, we invite probably someone who is a karate instructor to come and speak to the students. So it's not just about architecture alone, but we have what is called building voices, building alliances, which I must credit to Dr. Pushpa Patel when he was part of the institution he initiated. And we continue to work with that. And we are still in an experimental mode, which brings me to what is a classroom, which is one of the other questions that was part of the brief that was given to us. In fact, if you ask me what is a classroom, I would say the whole world is a classroom. And for all of us, we are perpetual students. But for us, the spaces of inquiry are embedded in the city, the community, the artisans who also inhabit our space. So we have our masons, we have, because it's a campus which is still under construction, we have our masons and carpenters also coming into our classrooms to teach our students and also teach us, and also with other institutions. And the nature itself is such a big teacher at AMI, because every time it rains, we know how inefficient our building is, because most of the time our students' models fly off in one direction, sheets get spoiled, and so it's easy to teach climatology at AMI. But at the same time, it's not just about the physical space, but we also experiment with the virtual world, because that's also a place where this camaraderie is built amongst the students, because we inhabit both these spaces at the same time. So there are several experiments that happen in AMI, which sort of looks at the virtual world, with one of it being the game studio. So it's not just about hands-on exercises, but we encourage students and faculty members to collectively think with hands, with eyes, and also with brain, so that we want to encourage them to ask questions. But there are challenges here, because the aspiration mismatch is such a fatal thing, because what is the aspiration of the founding members? How much of what we practice in the academy should get connected to what is in the field of architecture, building practice? Maintaining relevance, being in a slightly remote area, we have to depend on largely what we find on the internet for building that relevance, but also through these networks, and probably when CFA invites us for a jury, or when C invites us for a jury, we get to expand upon what we're thinking. And we are very clear on one thing. Often people who make buildings, although I do make buildings, but I still want to call people who make buildings, say that academy does not offer sufficient experience for the students so that they can come to practice and integrate the practice. Now, I think there is something wrong with that, because if every academy sort of creates these architects to launch them and make buildings right away, then we are only continuing what is already being done. But instead, I think the role of academy is to make them think, so that they question what is being practiced, and therefore there is a change in the field of practice. So we are very clear on that probably our students may not be able to make a huge building when they are out, but I'm pretty sure that they will be able to ask certain critical questions. And therefore, who thinks all of us have to think together? we have to have debates, discussions around. Avni is a platform where I think anybody can ask questions to each other and nobody is silenced in that sense. Another challenge that we face at times is outdated teaching methods, outdated knowledge systems, vis-a-vis the aspirations of the students. So when a student comes, they come with certain aspirations of becoming an architect, or becoming a photographer, becoming a filmmaker, and whether we are equipped with that kind of knowledge to guide them through that process is something that we are struggling with. And what forms are we envisaging? Not to have one at all at this point, because we're only 10 years old, and 10 years is like, I don't know, maybe the fetus moment for a institution is what I feel. So I understand the fluidity issue, but at the moment, I think we are looking at kind of a fluid nature where we can slowly and generously sort of build our strengths over a period of time. But that strength comes for us from networking and learning from each other, and that's something we want to really nurture, and I think it's a wonderful platform for us to do that. And by saying that, one of the greatest strengths that we have is a horizontal leadership. So it's not a top-down approach at all at Avni, although we have a governing council at the top of the order because they are founding members. Certain decisions, critical decisions, are made by the faculty, the head, the students. For example, when we are hiring faculty, our students are very much part of the hiring process. They sit through some of these processes that we have. They listen to the faculty who is coming and taking a lecture and give us inputs, and they are very, very good with readings. So sometimes we feel they should sit in the studios often. So some of the strength or the areas that we have identified as making and crafting for us, because we have a very solid set of faculty members and students who are inclined towards that. Because of our presence in that particular cultural geography, coexistence is something that we are often intrigued by the idea, and many of our studios look at how different species co-inhabit with each other and what are those forces and lines that we draw, how carefully do we draw, etc. Spatial politics, because Kerala is very political in that sense. Whatever you inhabit, you have to be political. So, and then looking at and very, very clearly stating that making building is not the only form of practice. There are various other forms of practices and we need to diversify that. Now, having said all this, where do the resources come from? So, as you rightly said, it's a trust that is running this school. Student fee is hardly enough for us to run. 80% of our student fee is salaries alone, if not more. And it's a patron who is pumping all the money into the system, which makes it very difficult, and there's a lot of, it gets very difficult at times to get those resources in place. But we have a huge set of friends of Avni who are from various parts of the world. Some are industrialists, some are into the hospitality area, whose generosity is helping us build this institution. And therefore, because we see how resources resources were extracted from this land over a period of time, and we happen to be in that space, and as we are seeing how difficult it is to generate these resources, there's a kind of care with which we occupy that space. And the students and colleagues and the administrative staff are there's a sense of care that we sort of give to each other and to the institute that we have become. And therefore, we sort of ask ourselves, it's not enough that we engage with the world, but it is also important for us to situate and engage with the locality and the people who constitute what we understand as Tamashir, or even the villagers who live there are part of the community. So in a nutshell, we may not quite create architects, but we are very sure that there are humans who are thinking, because It's important for us to respond to the society. So with this, I'll end. This is a picture from my whiteboard. So these are the questions we keep asking ourselves. What to learn and unlearn. It's as messy as you can see this. How do architects act and respond? These are cut through our semesters, and many of these questions are taken in our symposium, which goes into our studios. What is uncertain and how do we offer responsibly? What shifts? What is this idea of future community? What is most urgent for us? Where have all the people gone in cities, and what are our future practices? Now, I have purposefully kept that Sauni auntie thing here because it's written by a child who came into my room and wanted to write Sauni auntie, but she wrote Sauni auntie, and I thought it's so important to be there because you should be Sauni and anti-Sauni at some times, right? So it's not about just institutions cannot be about individuals. Institutions has to be about the people who make that institution, and therefore much of whatever I spoke right now comes from my predecessors, from Architect Abid to Architect Vivek to Dr. Anuradha Chatterjee to Dr. Push Patel, and it's whether we are there or not, the institution has to move on, and therefore it is a continuous way of churning to be fragile, but at the same time to find our ground and our stability as an institution. So this is the kind of quagmire that I sort of inhabit on a day-to-day basis. So thank you so much.
So, thank you for that presentation. I'll now invite Prasad and
So I'll take a minute to reintroduce or relaunch the book, which was out yesterday. It took us 1.5 years, a little more than that, to put it together. And it's basically putting together 10 years of experiments and explorations. At sea and articulates this idea of softness. And I thought it would be interesting to bring this idea of softness, because this softness is about an institutional ability to hold diversity but also remain agile. So a lot of it is kind of written about that, and it kind of it holds the institute in flesh and spirit. So yeah, the book is available. It's there. Another just kind of open the website of SEAL. The website of SEAL kind of sets up also the structure of SEAL. And before that, I'll just give 4 statistical points. We just closed the report on architectural education. And just 4 statistical points. First of all, private colleges and private universities take up almost 80% of the load of training architects in India. Substantially, it's huge amount. So, secondly, in the last decade, the number of architecture schools have increased by 350%. So there were 130 schools in 2010, 2020 there are 406 colleges. So it means also lesser demand of schools and lesser salaries and precarity of institutions, precarity of teachers, etc. Third thing is architects are not trained to engage with 90% of the population in this country. So that's the third one. And the fourth one is a more reductive thing, which is basically there is a reduction of academia to educational institution. academia has kind of brought down to the idea of education institution. So what were we trying to do? We were trying to kind of reclaim the idea of academia, and for that we thought we need to kind of put together an ecosystem. And for us, the cities, the ecosystem, the friends, and the extended city and the extended friends are the ecosystem. So if you look at the website opens in 4 other websites. So there is a school which is a separate website, which is basically, and if you look at the school website is a conglomeration of another 200 websites, which is, for example, 4 courses, and then if I go to any of them, if I go to genealogy or any of these, then each of them will museum, and then each of them will be I opened the wrong page of all the business. Of all the institutions. So yeah, so this is each one of it is so basically in the first week of entering into school, every student is trained to make their own website, and all submissions happen through the website, and that becomes the archive of the school. So it's kind of it's always available, and if 2 or 3 websites shut down, it's okay because there are other 300 to hold. So this kind of a network, collaborative, holding each other is something is at the core, the DNA of the institutional strategy at sea. One of the websites, there's also some of the Center for Spatial Studies, which we established in 2019. And if you look at it, it's basically the space for teachers and their research. We figured out a way in which we can provide 50% of time for teachers to do their work. Paid time. And sometimes, if the resources, if we have resources, we also provide a research assistant. So, and each of the faculty team or faculty is involved in different kinds of work. So, for example, organization of housing, for example, environment sanitation, architecture. So it will have its own kind of, it will have its own kind of thing, so there is like a serious kind of space for teachers to kind of have their works. This work is reviewed by each other, by all of us together, and there are a variety of ways in which papers are being written, the whole board of things. Also, there is a specific slot provided in the curriculum where if the teacher wants to experiment something with students, so there is a space available for that. Of course, nobody stops them. In fact, we would like that all these practices of the teachers kind of enter the students. So that's the second thing. There's a third website which also opens parallelly, and this is basically C-City, which is our engagement with the world through series of exhibitions and series of talks. We've held some 200 talks, more than 200 talks in the last 10 years. It kind of, so this is the current thing that is going on. So it has an event calendar, it has a whole lot of things actually. It's there's some feature that it opens up into another. Yeah. So it opens up into another thing, and each of that is kind of written about, and it's a forest of things, and it is nice to be like that because it holds together so many things. And the fourth website which opens is of C-Press, which has the C diaries, for example, which is basically reflections of on current works by teachers. This was last year's conference, full of things. And then there is also the Sea Archives, which is another avenue to enter. There are big books, so there's one book right now, there's another book will come now. So the new book is not being so it's this ecosystem that we are thinking of kind of holding the institute in, which provides, and the ambition is to kind of extend it beyond the school to kind of work with more partners in our neighborhood, but also in the city, but in the region, and we've already initiated a number of collaborations towards that. So, where is that? So yeah, so these are opens and then space for teachers and practice. Constant contact with the world at different scales. So there is so today C is a cultural space for this neighborhood. You must have seen things happening. A lot of things happen. There are 15 days. There is something or the other. Everything is archived. We active YouTube channel. The whole thing is edited. Sometimes we have performances in the space below. We invite young practitioners to come and build an experiment. This was the first one. It was a pavilion made of paper. We work with city. We work with students of some municipal school, trying to build some play objects for them. Working with railway stations, public places, participating in the biennales, in international exhibitions. And this is the most recent one which I was talking about in the morning, that now we are very actively working with one shoemaker community over here, and we realize that the housing problem cannot be done through building new housing. We need to figure out a way to better. And in 3 years' time, we also realize that policy cannot play a role in it. We need to figure out another mechanism of doing it. There is some money, there is a process. Only thing is we are not trained in the process to enter that incremental grow, incremental change and shift, and therefore we need to kind of find new ways. So now we are working on that, and then we established something called the C Clinic, which is basically a design support unit for communities and houses which cannot afford design services. Okay, this is another one. We do a aggressive and a lot of times I get a lot of things from my teachers and staff. It's like a very aggressive review process that we do, but the courses are reviewed by students and by teachers, by internal and external peers, by academic council. The review of the school as where we stand in the university, where we stand in the market, where we stand with respect to other offices, review of staff, by peers and by different whole series of review, and it's an open review. It's basically everybody knows who's reviewing whom, so it's kind of so it's and it is compiled and it is kind of and this becomes the basis to shift and change every year. So every year we So, and this is before handing over to Anuj. I mean, the next 10 years we want to focus on collaborations and networks. So that we feel that the way to grow, the way to kind of, it's not in this empire building monolith ways of doing things. You can't, and that has been the typical way of growing. You increase number of seats, you increase number of courses, and then one political economic shift happens and everybody cracks down. So it's like it cannot be like that. If you go, then you have to figure out a way in which you network and you go like the rhizome, like the Hydra. And in that, I think many things we did actually. I mean, if you look at this particular reflection, it's basically we employed craftspeople and artisans. So we have a full-time carpenter who is basically equivalent to a teacher over here and takes classes. Special courses conducted by faculty and designers in different kind of community organizations. But there are various kinds of national and national collaborations that we want to enter into, what we discussed last few days. Different cultural practitioners, different NGOs and CPOs want to work with southern schools in Africa, schools in South Asia, schools in the southern hemisphere. So and very specific ones, for example, with cultural practitioners and think tanks, we want to work with them to articulate some courses. In some cases, we want to work with them on exchange programs. So it's a kind of a network model that we see ourselves. I just need to.
Yeah, I just kind of put one more slide to footnote this whole thinking to the year 2009 when incidentally Prasad Rupali wrote me as a research associate in a large project called Cultural Spaces in India. And during that time, the project was trying to establish a framework for what should the framework for future cultural institutions in India look like. And I remember in one of these, brainstorming meetings or a side discussion, I don't remember exactly, that what if it is a school, Prasad said. And 5 years down the line, there was the plan for C. And I think it was a very interesting kind of thing for me to map, because I think here it was interesting that there was already an imagination of the institution in a cultural framework rather than a techno-scientific framework. And why that is important is because our knowledge of the world through the framework of culture is way more softer and way more amenable as compared to the way in which it comes to us in the traditional kind of techno-scientific framework legacy. And in that framework, I think what C has done is something which allows me to, bring out these 3 points of difference where we've tried to create institutionally an interpretive landscape versus an instructional landscape. And the difference is just that an interpretive landscape allows multiple meanings to coexist, layered associations to produce a very nuanced understanding of the world, rather than a flat, prescriptive understanding of the world. The second is the idea of creating a compounding environment, and I use this word compound. I know it is a confusing word, but I use the word compound from the science of making compounds, which is different from making a mixture. Like compound brings together in very specific proportions distinct materials to create a new material, and as they decompose, they create new distinct materials because they can only hold themselves stably and not otherwise. And so it suggests the constant interaction and mixing of ideas and people in the most affordable ways, as opposed to a consolidating environment of the traditional university pattern, which suggests sedimentation. And in sedimentations, layers don't necessarily interact with each other. Rather, they end up solidifying ways of doing things and even become impervious to some extent. And lastly, to think of the other institution as a perforative kind of space. I'm not using the word porous. Perforative, which allows things to pass while retaining some. that also, also changing what passes through, because what has passed through perforative space is no longer constituted in the same way, and it works with the gaps and distances instead of blocking, like a wall space, which is, also kind of black box. Like most institutions today are black box, where you don't know how it is working, don't know what it is doing, and they become introverted, they become insecure with power and stale. So with that, I feel that and particularly if we are thinking of institutions to establish a connection with the world, we need to kind of intervene into the energies of the world through the energies of the world, being in it. And so I think these 3 points were some put like an ecology to lay out the coordinates of the ecology of an institution that probably C kind of tries to work with. So yeah, that's all.
This has to leave about 20 minutes for the questions. Again, specifically what happened.
I was actually kind of trying to take down some notes, and I was in each of the presentations, there was something very interesting happening, and I thought that there was always this inside-outside conundrum, like what happens inside the institution and how does it map out outside the institution. And in that sense, there's always, and in each of the presentations came through, the specific axes that each of you laid out vis-a-vis institution versus the society, or institution versus the community, or institution versus the industry. And so I was wondering if there were some reflections in the kind of aesthetics then of the educational apparatus that gets produced. And also the second thing and what I mean by that is the aesthetics of experience of society mediated through the academy of engaging with each other. Aesthetics of engaging, like how does the academy prepare you to engage with different scales of world once you kind of enter into the world. And lastly, I also felt it seemed like most of the like the idea of imagining the institution was also heavily informed by the idea of managing students and visioning curriculum. Whereas if you think of it, through a cultural framework, it expands to think about what kind of world we are producing. Not by managing students or by visioning curriculum, but the ways in which things get absorbed into people and affects value systems while they are still kind of your interlocutors or your constants in the institution or the academy. So yeah, I just wanted to put this down. Maybe we can take a round of responses.
It's a long question, but there are many parts of the question. I'll just answer what I understood of the question. The last part regarding, what was the last part? Managing, teaching student versus the larger. I don't think that's so complex, right? I mean, if you historically, and I always use the word university, I find university to be a better term. If you look at the purpose of the university was not only to train students. That's a polytechnic. There's a difference between vocational training. University was always entrusted with creating new forms of knowledge for a better, just, equitable society for every student. So I don't think that's so difficult. And I don't see any reason why an architecture school needs to reinvent the wheel, because it is already there in your in the historicity of what is the purpose of institution. So that's number one. And we can definitely look at that, which means, and that's what we were doing. So when Prasad is showing about, let's say, the engagement with the artisans, with the city, how faculties have 50% time to do research, or have reflective practice. Actually, in some sense, what we're doing is exactly that. It's not about managing curriculum and student. There's a larger mandate. This is not a mandate exclusive to architecture school, by the way. The problem is we use these terms that feel so exclusive to architects or architectural humanities, but I think in much more clearer fashion this has been articulated by all good academic institutions. The first question which I understood is how do our students engage with the world when they step out? And I think that's the Somebody said it in a very articulate fashion that to imagine that we produce graduates who start producing buildings is also a fallacy because I think we have to move away from that. I think she used the word that I don't know whether my students will be able to produce architecture. I hope they're able to. But they will ask good questions. Let me extend that. I think maybe what taking the liberty, perhaps what we're teaching our students is that when they go out in the world, they are critical and empathetic, of course, question, but they're always, they're able to teach themselves and find a way out. A lot of things that we're teaching today will be redundant tomorrow. Let's assume in terms of material and technology. So what happens? So I think the graduates that we produce are thinking individuals who, if embedded in a certain circumstances, so what we are teaching them today is not really the stuff of what the building that makes them do. You are teaching them to how to teach yourself. Because tomorrow in a world that nobody is able to predict, that's what is part of we really don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. But I will not stop at being able to ask questions. And I think as taking 5 years of students' life, accredited 5-year bachelor's program, I think we cannot stop at asking questions. I think we have to be not definitely claiming they can make complete buildings, that they will, but they will be able to understand the problem, they will be able to teach themselves in the circumstances, and they will be able to lead. So we do want to create thought leaders. Right? We want to create thought leaders, and I think that is where the DNA of an institute. And I always look at how to look at the foundation program is a very big test for me. So there is one school of thought that says the foundation program is about skills. Right? And you need the skill to write, to be able to describe. You need the skill to draw, to be able to communicate, blah, blah, blah. And that's one school of thought. And we have said our foundation program is essentially a program that will make you first think. Skills will come. Skills will follow. We are patient enough. So I think those are the interesting questions to ask about what do we see ourselves, our graduates as doing once they step out.
Yeah, I was thinking more through the, I was thinking a kind of more abstract or probably phrasing it as the inside-outside concept. Like, if we forget even that we are teaching inside the classroom, then we are just thinking along. And students are also thinking along. You're doing what you have to do. And the students pick on what they feel they should do. And does it still remain teaching there?
I mean, one of the things we did in the last exhibition we did is that we asked each faculty members to first tell us what is the present crisis in their mind. What is it that they are most concerned with in their own journey as architects? And hence to be able to then articulate, that is why I teach the way I teach. So I think, and to kind of recognize that we are all actually in a journey. We happen to be teaching. You know what I mean? We are all, and that's the kind of That's the kind of fraternity of scholars we need who are in the course of a constant questioning or a constant search. In this part of their life, they are associated with my institute. Right? That's how I looked at this. I don't know whether I'm trying to. But I think we're all attempting it in our own ways, using our own words. But conceptually, we are very, it's the same thing, right?
Thanks for this wonderful panel. I have a question for Pratyush. Pratyush, I mean, I really loved your provocations and teammates. So one of the things, one of my questions is if you can talk about how your institution engages with some of these challenges. So if you open that out, because you laid down all the, the situation that we are in today. So how do you address them at your institution? And the second thing is that I have a feeling that kind of university that you're talking about, the university in which questions are posed, new knowledge is produced, is probably a university that can arrive in it. And I say this because a lot has been spoken about in terms of critique of how the colonial system of education was set. But post-independence, Gandhi's intervention into education policy made it into a vocational training school, even at the university. And that has not changed even in the new education policy. So, is it that the institutions are supposed to be addressing this? Whose responsibility it is, and how should we be able to make that change?
Second question is a tough one. This is, in fact, the provocation is to find those answers or at least head towards those. But I didn't purposely present my institute because today I have decided to just share my experience in the two institutes that I've spent my lifetime with. Right? I mean, this is the Delhi Institute, I've been there for just last 2 years. But just before the panel started, we were sharing as to how wonderful it is for an architectural institute to exist close to, let's say, a school of science, or a school of liberal studies, or a school of robotics. One thing that we have started doing in our institute, something I started, is that you can, let's say, do a minor in public health, provided you start going to the School of Science. And this is, I think, I also feel that one, we do want to move away and have our own little bubble so that we are free, but we also lose out a lot in the process, right? And then there is this lot of energy goes into bringing all the other disciplines to the School of Architecture, rather than the students going out there in those disciplines, because it's a very different kind of learning. It's a complex learning. It is, the onus is then on the students to figure out and make sense of what they saw in some other discipline. So now that is what's possible in a small private university. Perhaps when I looked at his presentation, I was pretty much amazed because he was talking about the industry co-op program and other things. That is what something that we have started with. The other impact, which is something that I was telling you, what happens if an architect begins to head a university, maybe it was a mistake on your part. But our engineering school is now using the studio pedagogy. And I had this, I'll show you, I got this brochure. This is the mechanical engineering brochure. I mean, architecture and design as a discipline has so much to offer to other disciplines, we don't even realize that. Somehow we are so much talking to each other, and we have historically been shunned by, I mean, you, like Prasad has this allergy towards science, you know. And then he starts his presentation by talking about 80% private university, and he's using all the methods of classic, quantifying qualitative information. But in fact, this is a good time, let me tell you. if you look at NEP, right? And when I looked at NEP, I said, listen, we were doing this all this for a while. Architecture schools, now because of the very interesting community we had, from 80s or 90s were doing everything in NEP. So, you have a mechanical engineering, civil and electrical actually adopting studio technology. Now I find those as still early steps in kind of trying to broad-based architectural education, form more networks, form more witnesses to our journey. I think we need more witnesses to create more institutional memory. Because again, it is perhaps Sankalp was hinting at that we have seen enough of institutions change overnight, that too again and again. And that's something very peculiar about our country. You know, institutional structures are, there's a beauty in being fluid, but you can't remain fragile for a very long time. Regarding your second question, we need a whole set of different structured conversation. But I know what it is. I mean, this is the eternal quest. I find, it's been an education for me. In fact, I find some of the scientific community dedicated to some very interesting question that has a huge impact on the world. Very genuine, just that they use a very different language and we don't kind of use that language. So we also need to find that common language that exists between disciplines. So I'm a bit wary of language that is very specific to our discipline. I don't think that's the universality of terminology. Now I have to catch my flight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I think Vishwanath is watching our discussion online, and should I read out his comment unless someone else wants to respond?
Just to mention that before I've been a long time associate friend, traveling companion for C, and we couldn't get it this time. Good thanks for listening and participating in this.
I think somebody wanted to say something. I think Vishwanath has just shared a comment, and he's saying that the beginnings of AA London as a response to the higher education in 1847 and the beginnings of the London School of Architecture in 2015 once again in response to the hegemony of universities are pertinent case studies for this discussion. Are there new forms of institutionalization in response to the nature and limits of architecture as a profession in India? Thinking afresh, even if for a brief moment, will be useful. Second, we are living in a fast changing world, and the notion of studying for 5 years and practicing later is outdated. How should this inform the BArch program? Content in the form of lectures, case studies, entire courses are available online. And how should the institution respond to this? The third thing, a couple of institutions that come to mind, albeit at school level, is Agora in the Netherlands and Prenda Micro Schools in the US. Fourth, one thought is that the role of the institution is to sports coach, rather than teach. Students can learn from wherever they want, and the coach observes the student performing. That helps. Something their action. There's a yeah. So correct their actions. The coach observes the student performing and helps correct her actions. So these are some points and questions or provocations by Vishwanath. Thanks Vishwanath for those points. We definitely try to debate them all.
Anuj, for your, I don't know whether I understood your question on the aesthetics of experience in the society. Is that right, Victor?
I've often been thinking that a lot of times when we study something from an institution and get out or get back, let's say, to the world, we are more distant from the world or our immediate world. With the new ways of seeing that we have learned, and that I've not been able to reconcile that for a very long time, and it has to do with some really how do you put it, rewiring of the ways in which you absorb the world in the absence of this academy, and that's where my terminology of the aesthetics of educational apparatus is located. That what is it? How does it rewire our aesthetics of appreciating the world? Let's say, and what does that aesthetics do to then relating back to the society? Sorry, it sounds like a very meta question, but I just thought.
I just thought I'd share one or two experiences here. So I think it was sometime in 2018 when Kerala had the major floods and landslides. And Avni was very close to the place where the landslide occurred. In fact, it's not as fragile as it seems in the neighborhood, but still we are in one of those fragile regions of Kerala. So the students saw it in front of them what was happening, and they were taken to this place for various studies, including this initiative by the Institute of Architects Calicut chapter, which is trying to rebuild this community and community infrastructure here. And some of our students who were really engaged with these projects, when they graduated, we found a very interesting deviation from the usual way of going and working in an architectural office or starting something on your own and then going on to getting awards and stuff like that. Instead, we had a small collective that started working with potter communities, which was spread across the region, and they started working with them in terms of understanding from them the skills, the methods, and also trying to evolve their own ways of developing design. And it has now become a full-fledged studio. So after 5 years, rather than really getting into that, that kind of niche practice, which will fetch you, these projects which are architectural in nature, we sort of started working with the community, building a network of the community. Similarly, there were a bunch of students who went on to build a designer collective, which is in Cochin, which houses spaces for designers to come and work together and build their, affinities and all of that. So that kind of entrepreneurial, activity sort of brings out the fact that it's not just a linear way of, getting out of an institution like this, where you end up doing certain kind of work, or you start looking at the society in a particular way. But there are many different ways that one gets to engage with the society, and you become much more. That idea of care starts getting embedded into the way you engage with the society. So I think that's where the role of these, and also there are a couple of students who, after they did the coexistence kind of a studio, sort of start developing interest in something else, and they start generating certain kind of practices that take into consideration the ecology and the kind of different organisms that are around them, which shapes your architectural practice in a very different way. So I think these are very important for any institution to sort of offer them different lens through which you can see, feel and engage with the society. So I just thought I had to say.
I'll just tackle this thing on values and communities and then come to passion first. So on values, one is just lead by example, I think that having the right people on board in the school is really critical. So we take a lot of trouble to figure out who should be on board. It's about people. It makes a big difference. Small things like, for example, when everybody employs to the elite system, this I'm operationalizing what we are going to do. So we have a system where if you're not satisfied with your marks, there's a specific time that you can go and speak with them and prove that you've got something which was you're due for more. So examples of that. Ethics are in terms of life lessons that we keep reading out and small little things. But coming to the community part of it, we are sort of engaged with community schools, work with the local disadvantaged community like the Paraka community or community of weavers, where they come in and then we have product designers who work part-time, who work with them and students and create new creations. So they've been very successful doing those things. Another part is certification course, like professionals can say, this is like a community college kind of course, like universities and community schools, community colleges. So we are, there's like two staff. Like example, we are offering a few ones like this Spanish, some others into the community. So it's small differences. I like what Pratish talked about minor degrees. Just now, Vinay, Mangalore, and our Bangalore campus are just joined. It's 2 weeks now. We're having a meeting to formalize that. We're talking about minor degrees and exactly the same ecosystem because we have engineering, health sciences, all of them there. You know about it's about 20 credits plus or minus that completes over your third and fourth year to be able to get that minor degree. So you're working in mechanical engineering, but you have the other one in say biological science, or some ecology. Very nice, good ones. To Ashika's point about this AA and London, and as far as I've heard, AA took its prominence when one of the directors much earlier realized the geographic location of London. And that's when a lot of professionals came into London floor to where the developer. So made use of that to have, I'm thinking one of those was one of the AA started to have a lot of these great people coming in, which made a big difference. The London School of Architecture recently is about offices that got together. Something maybe like the Warrior example. So many offices and they promoted the school. So that's also a beautiful one way to get the 5-year versus online. We spoke about the degrees and like master and what I liked about the 2-year program is the first year is online. I think Florida International University is something like 2 years masters completely online. So I think this is great. Start to do the online part. You're just shepherding, you're shepherding this thing. And the sports kind of thing kind of works. The last one also. I don't know much about drama, but I'm sure it will be schools. Thank you.
I mean, just widen it a little bit, this discussion, I think next 20-25 year horizon, if one looks at it very carefully, I mean, I think the environmental discussion will fade out and the health discussion will emerge. And largely because of old age, insurances, a whole series of things. And the demography of the country is also moving towards the large cities are definitely becoming elderly. So that is one aspect of it, but there is that dimension, a shift towards old age health from environment sustainability. It's very different. These are produced in time, the discussions. So that's one dimension of it. And second dimension of it is that despite MEP, the state involvement in education is going to further reduce and shrink. It's already shrunk and reduced. But it's going to shrink and reduce, focused more towards subsidies, caste-based subsidies, and other kinds of subsidies, gender-based subsidies also now. This state knowledge to state, women's education is free actually. So that's going to happen. And in the absence of state regulation, the market will be in full force to kind of work. So in such a horizon of such an emerging horizon, how we should be kind of restructuring, reformulating ourselves, because it's an important evolving political economy. And how do we kind of so the older questions will fade away. And in the context of health in the market, how does one, what are the values one should hold firm to? How do we kind of restructure, reformulate ourselves? Because it has impacts on education directly. There's a direct balance to how you teach, the biggest considerations. So I want to kind of speculate a little bit about, it's no longer the regionalisms, it's about the other aspect. It's about the regional, the environmental regionality will no longer be the driving force for our discussions as it was in the last 20-30 years. So before that, it wasn't. So that will kind of fade away slowly. Something else, I strongly think it will be health care, that elderly question. That's going to be the thing. How do we start rebracing, rethinking? Because these are the institutional questions that we need to look at. The second thing is, we will remain as, for the state, we will no longer be the education providing institutions. Of course, we will be in the market, but we will become increasingly milking cows. Because they will try to extract like the accreditation things, like the approval systems, and so that will also happen. That kind of. So how do we kind of start bracing ourselves as will be an emerging question for the schools, and also slightly wider thing also for the discipline, the question of having a old age, how would we kind of work itself. Today, Mysore, what we found was it's a Mysore, Pune in this state, Trichy also. People retire there. Now the city is becoming a place to retire. This is the middle class or the upper middle class which is retired. There are other sections which are not retiring to those places. So now, what are the questions for us as in the discipline, but also in the institution? I think it's something which we need to kind of jointly start thinking and preparing and bracing.
I'm trying to draw points from even the last 2 days. What Sankalp also mentioned in the morning, and I think also day before, and his attempt to kind of speak of the aesthetic within the institute. I think she mentioned about the frugality or the fragilities of the institute and to how to retain them in some ways. And also I think bringing a lot of the demographics that is going to impact the way institutions might shape themselves. But I think that we can also invert that question of like who is the student then in also this new speculative sort of space of the next years. So because the student might also change, and I think with all of this they can also bring in
Rashikar's comment from the last panel about how you bring the scroll into the pedagogy. And so I think the institution, I just kind of many things going in the mind, and I feel that institutions might, we have to think of institutions as new autodidactic grounds on which many attempts like this could possibly be possible. And I think the constitution of students who are called students or who are students or who are teachers, I think that relationship might change also quite soon. In all, because you have so many people right now shifting from architecture, and also there are other places where there are students which are not, like knowing from him, are not enrolling to schools, and I think that so there might be a big percentage which are either becoming entrepreneurs or somewhere into the digital social space. So I mean, not kind of bringing in the vulnerability of the profession or any other thing, but I'm just trying to open up these other forms which are developing. And then how does one kind of institute a form of maybe teaching, learning, or however you want to call them. So I feel that I think the form of the autodidactic, or maybe the autodidactic ground on which you can imagine institution, you can start thinking of.
Well, if we think 30 years back and see what happens to institution now versus if they are now and imagine what is going to happen, it's a very different way to look at it. What we certainly know is that the question of equity is not going to question of gender is not going to question of environment is not going to question of health is not going to but the question of population is also growing now. So either the world is at a plateau or is going down, or we are reaching a plateau and we will soon go down. And it is going to happen probably in the next 30 to 50 years if the plan. By the time 30-50 years happens, the housing stock will now, we will not need that much housing stock, like what is happening all across the world. So when that starts happening, it affects the institution. It also affects the nature of social formation. Because anyway, the old formats of society, we are seeing constantly the old institutions falling apart in some or the other way, being questioned. But the thing is, because the digital space has expanded, it has not been explored fully. So it will require maybe another, I anticipate not more than 5 years. Because the intensity with which digital space is being explored is faster than what we imagined when we were physically moving out. So the space is so fast that in the next 5 to 10 years, it should give us some result as to where the world is sort of heading to. The question is that, what would architecture then be? What would the nature of institution then be? How will the profession navigate itself? Because those problems are not with let's say, medical field. Okay, the problems are with fields where there is a shrink over a period of time, not this generation, but there is shrinking of sort of shrinking of needs. So it's very difficult to imagine what it could happen. But one can only think about the fact that it is going to change. And right now, the issue is right now those people who are sitting and articulating this are people who are coming from a different format of training. We will be soon replaced by these young students who's little ahead. They have far more better idea of digital age, and they may think very different because the circumstance in which they will be operating would be very different. So it would be very difficult to sort of predict. The only thing what we can think about is the agility to find a space, because we also see that the formats of employment has gone. You cannot, I don't think now anymore, I think that we will have a full-time job. I mean, I'm myself right now thinking that there is nothing like a full-time job. You do a task, you go, you get paid. And many people the society is there, I see young people who are much more freer thinking like that. So it's a very different time, and I personally don't think that we'll have to wait for the time, but the factors, the preconditions are already here, is what I would say. Other thing which I think what will impact is certainly military and space technologies are going to be changing, and it will give an impetus to the society. It will bring new things to the, we don't know how it will help, not help, but that's how it has been happening. Military, space and medical, these are the three things that naturally changes the society because they are at the frontiers of knowledge creation.
I mean, in some ways, this kind of the changing institutions, we got a little bit of a taste of that in COVID, right? That is, there was a collapse of the way we know new institutions. Education spaces were different, hospital spaces were different, you know. But I think what was also interesting is that it brought about a certain kind of mutuality. You know, there was a kind of solidarity that became infrastructure. So I'm just thinking, I mean, of course, digital and, you know, all of those things will change, but is there a certain kind of humanity, is there a kind of infrastructure of mutuality that can then become the backbone, right? And I think that is where it comes back to the way we create institutions where, you know, I think everybody has said that, how do you create institutions where you're thinking, asking questions, but also laying the foundation for equity and other things, right? So I think like, how do we kind of, because we soon forgot a lot of that, you know? COVID went away and we're like, okay, chalo, now let's go back, business as usual. But there were certain instances that we held on to, you know, like the idea of work being, home became so many more places. It became workplace, it became an institutional space, it became a space of support. So I think there are a lot of clues in terms of what humanity is capable of in terms of extreme situations. And so I think there is something to learn from that in terms of building societies. And again, I mean, things will change by themselves because, you know, technologies change and other things. But at some point, there is the role of institutions to seed those changes, to nudge those changes. Perhaps you can't really determine them, but you can nudge them. You know, so I think all the more the role of institutions start getting important. And I'm not talking about institutions remaining, consolidated. Of course, they may become like what Tushar was saying, autodidactic spaces. We had a whole seminar on post-institutions, where we were saying that, you know, perhaps the academy is not going to remain as consolidated. It will get fragmented, it will get, you know, there will be autodidacts generated out of those. So how do we, and that's the question also for us of Pedagogues Collective, to really think of what are the next 10 years for an institution to grow in a different format. You know, where you don't build silos, you don't build empires, because empires were of a previous generation, but more agile infrastructures to create this kind of community of support. You know, so I mean, this kind of, yeah.
I just wanted to add one more point. The thing is, history is constantly showing us expansion and contraction. There is nothing hidden about it. Empires expand and they contract. Something happens. So it will happen. The same thing will happen. Now, the only thing is, so institution will find its. So what will happen is, lesser, you will have smaller institution and more network institution. The institutions are not going to go. The only thing is, so we will not be alive, but the world will, in my view, will be shrinking geographically as well. There will be cities, and cities will also shrink. So even in Bombay, there will be Kandivali and Leh, but in between there will be nobody. So you will have to figure out either to remove it and have those connections, because you don't need so much anymore.
Just a comment from one of our students who is returning, so he couldn't attend, but he is watching it online. Aditya Boite. I'll just read out his comment. I was wondering, in what ways do existing pedagogical models reinforce traditional gender roles within architectural education? While design studios often claim to be neutral spaces, gender biases persist in site selection, project typologies, and representation within the curriculum, often favoring large-scale masculine-coded projects over those centered on care, domesticity, or communal spaces. How do factors like caste, class, gender, and disability shape access to architectural education? And do institutions actively address these barriers? Scholarship programs, mentorship initiatives, and outreach efforts exist, but do they genuinely dismantle exclusions, or do they function as superficial inclusivity measures? Similarly, does the syllabus reflect a diverse range of voices, including women architects, queer practitioners, and architects from marginalized communities? The absence of these perspectives not only the absence of these perspectives not only limits the discourse, but also reinforces the profession's historical hierarchies. Beyond content, how do learning spaces and power structures within institutions affect participation? Juries, for instance, often favor confidence and verbal articulation, privileging students from dominant social backgrounds while others struggle to be heard. Avni essay prize, please consider. Could alternative pedagogies that focus on collaborative work, peer-led discussions, and localized knowledge systems create a more inclusive and responsive architectural education? If the role of institutions is shifting from instruction to mentorship, could intersectional pedagogy be at the core of this transformation? So, of course, I mean, these are very, very deep, interesting thoughts to pursue, and I mean, try to constantly keep reflecting within one's, classroom also. I think we are already 20 minutes ahead of time, and I will invite Prasad Khanolkar to summarize and close the conference.
I'm not necessarily prepared for this, but I'll try. I mean, I don't want to summarize, but maybe think about what the last 2 days, but also today has offered to all of us as certain ideas, certain overlaps that we can start working with. I mean, the morning session was interesting to see, that the pedagogy is not necessarily just a school of thought. It is a school of thought, but it's also so much shaped by institutional history, where it's located, the form in the sense of the space of the school itself, but also institutional constraints. And I think that all of these are something that can be shared in the sense of, the energy of Bombay needs some kind of a rest. An exchange program sort of offers that. So, those collaborations that are possible. So there are different kinds of energies that are there. There are different kinds of spaces that we're working with, schools of thought. And I think that is where these collaborations and types can be helpful rather than thinking about it as one school of thought that we can come up with. Similarly, I think in terms of methods, I know, she's been working on, like I said, space syntax, which is something that only goes teaches away from it to different methodological point of views. So the kind of methods was also that we all are deeply dwelled into different kinds of methodological exploration that we can learn from. Sankalp's, who experiments with structures and systems and objects, sees investigations into questions of drawing and sort of methods of engaging with the field. So we all have these strengths that we've built over the last 10 years that at this point I think even to take them deeper requires these kinds of crossovers. I know Pratish was talking about that a university setup allows you to sort of cross over to other disciplines. I think all of us also have to come under the umbrella of architecture as pedagogy. We do have different kinds of inquiries that can open up each of us at this point to new ways of thinking and working as pedagogues. Institutions, something that is interesting is all four institutes have different things. There's a horizontality of a structure, both internally and externally, that we've sort of built over the years. The idea of architecture is beyond architecture, and it's also to partner with other kinds of small enterprises, companies, schools, to open it up in terms of a practice that doesn't have to be necessary, which is something also that she's been working on, but also that it's thinking about, I think all of us thinking about networks in very different sort of ways, extending to maybe different kinds of entities. And I think that maybe extending the network towards each other allows to build it further, maybe identify certain points where we can come together, to draw on other actors. That's something, so all of these is something that we need to build on, and I think it requires another 3 days to do that, maybe in a couple of months or maybe in 3 months time. So it's been a productive 3 days. So I want to thank all of you, all the panelists, Saptashi, Kiran, Somini, Professor Sankalp, and Judith, Belinda, Poonam is here, but even those who left, Amitabh. Not meaning that. Thank you for coming, for spending all the 3 days, participating in making this such a rich and productive conversation. This also marks the end of our annual week. So I also want to, it's been an intense, energetic, filled with food kind of a week. So I also want to thank all the students who have still survived, for all the food and for the energy and sort of for the exhibition together. Then all the non-teaching staff, Joel is all the non-teaching staff who's been working behind the scenes. So thank you, and we end this here. But we continue this conversation in a different mode. Yeah.